who's a long-term member from Berkeley. None of us who are presenting anything tonight are from Emeryville. We stay nonpartisan and even-handed that way because we have nothing to gain from any of this. And we're ready to go. Here we go. Whose is this?
So welcome to the 2016 election coverage from the League of Women Voters. I'm Diz Swift, as Deborah said, with the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville. This is, as she said, also is a series of programs that we're doing to showcase candidates across the three cities. And tonight, at this session, we're talking to candidates for the City Council. And so let me introduce the ones on the podium, and you'll notice that one is missing, and there's another one missing we'll talk to a minute. So John Van Geffen on the left, Christian Patz, Ali Medina, and John Bowders. So welcome all of you, and thank you for coming. And when Louise shows up, she will be there. We're sad tonight that Brenda Collins could not be with us. She's also a candidate, but she had surgery this morning, and so she can't be here. But we're honored that her daughter, Brittany Collins Rogers, on my right, is here and has agreed to give a 5-minute statement for Brenda so that she will be represented. Brittany?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Martinez, community members, city council members, school board members, as well as family and friends. It gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity to be in front of you this evening in honor of City Council candidate Brenda Collins. First, I would like to take a moment to thank our family and community of Emeryville for your prayers and well wishes during this time. As many of you have already heard, or been informed, candidate Collins underwent emergency surgery this morning. I'm happy to report that candidate Collins is on her way to a speedy recovery. She has already expressed and feels well and ready to lead Emeryville forward with renewed spirit and enthusiasm. Please allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Brittany Collins Rogers, Emory Unified School District School Board Trustee, as well as Emory Unified alumni and community resident. However, tonight, I sit before you as the daughter and strongest supporter of candidate Collins. It took a lot of energy and strong efforts on the parts of many to convince her to take this evening off in order to enjoy a few minutes of downtime while shaking off the effects of the local anesthesia. She agreed on one condition, and here I am. Voicing the importance of the positive impact electing Brenda Collins will have on the city of Emeryville. City Council candidate for Emeryville 2016 campaign has a strong vision regarding building the capacity of others. For example, she helped develop the single plan for student achievement, designed and instituted a parent and family center where she empowered the Emeryville community, facilitated workshops, conducted leadership seminars, while contracting with organizations that supported strong community engagement, creating strong sense of equity and high expectations with amazing outcomes. Brenda Collins is focused on moving forward with affordability, accountability, sustainability, public safety, housing the unhoused, safe biking, and creating a greener Emeryville with all great transparency. Traffic, public safety, as well as respecting the renters in Emeryville are a great concern for her. She has deeply expressed interest and set goals to create and offer awareness programs and community workshops, educating the community by offering recycling awareness in languages needed to communicate the importance of recycling and composting. My mother has worked endless hours with the Emory Unified School District, the City of Emeryville, Emeryville Police and Fire Department, and annually gathers the community to participate in memorable community building activities. After 12 years renting in Emeryville, Brenda Collins answers a call to action by running for City Council, publicly pledging to follow through on the long outstanding promises of an Emeryville that thrives for all. Her character and leadership, both courageous and strong, ensure a positive impact on behalf of the citizens of Emeryville. She knows relationships are essential to building resilient, healthy neighborhoods and a government that serves responsibly. Using a proven track record for building networks and effective personal relationships, she is poised to facilitate courageous conversations, bridging the gap between city, schools, and community across divides like class, generation, and race. Candidate Brenda Collins is ready to lead Emeryville forward, and although she is not here tonight physically, she is here in the spirit. And I would like to invite all of you to meet her Saturday, October 1st from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Propaganda Restaurant at 4000 Adeline Street so that you can come and engage with your questions, comments, and concerns for candidate Collins. Thank you all, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much, Brittany. So we'll miss Brenda Collins tonight, but thank you for the way to get in touch with her.
Thank you.
So we'll ask each of you, welcome Louise. Louise Engel has just joined us. So we'll begin by asking all of you the same question, and we'll ask them in order. So the first question will be taken by Louise, followed by John Van Geffen, and so forth. The next one by John, then Christian, and so forth. You'll have 1 minute, and as you see, you have timers to tell you when you're done. Before that, though, we'd like you to have 2 minutes for a statement from each of you. Introduce yourselves and tell us in that 2 minutes what you hope to achieve in your term in office. So if you would begin, Louise, with a 2-minute statement, who you are and what you hope to achieve.
Sure. I'm Louise Engel, been in Emeryville for 22 years, a resident owner. Happen to live on the peninsula in the big Watergate complex. I've been a business owner with a license here in Emeryville, small business for 20 years. Prior to that, I have an extensive and in-depth background in land use, in strategic planning for economic development, for ordinance development, and different aspects of real estate development and environmental review. Excuse my, I got it unfortunately delayed. As far as a very kind of the important issues in our neighborhood, and I know that the question asks for district, but I think that we're a small enough town, just 1.2 square miles, that I see this as a whole. And I believe that the pressing issue is to focus on the financing of our public services. Today, I survived Fire Ops 101, in which a number of us participated with the fire department, really learning what they did hands-on. And when it comes to our public services, it's really clear to me, using the fire department as an example, that we need to keep up with all of the changing technology, all of the evolving ways that our residential and mixed-use developments are occurring. And so we have had a lot of square footage built, residential and commercial. Now we need to focus on being sure that we have the public services, police, fire, water. This is really distracting, isn't it? To be sure that we can continue our good quality of life here in Emeryville.
Thank you, Louise. John?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for showing up today. To be direct, 3 issues that I'd like to see if I was on City Council. One is addressing the sense of community, which I believe putting in renter protections to avoid renter turnover. to incentivize and support small business, because I believe a lot of the city's culture comes from the mom and pop shops, the restaurants, the bars, the local coffee shops. And I want to support, however I can, the development of home ownership over rentals, because again, I think putting down roots is what's important about Emeryville. The second item is community development, which everyone here is going to have an opinion on, and that's the issue. There are as many opinions as there are different issues, whether it's bike lanes, park space, over density, transportation. My goal is just to get community input and make sure that it's something that we can all live with versus it's something that the region wants to give us. I think high density should be around transportation that already exists, like BART stops, and not be put into areas where we have to recreate our infrastructure. The third item I want to touch on is changing the directional compass of the council as it is today. I believe that right now the focus is on regional issues, on items that don't necessarily affect specifically Emeryville citizens or specifically Emeryville companies. I believe it's the City Council's job to specifically support the city. And if elected to council, my goal will be to change the direction to aim right back at us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Christian?
Thank you. I want to first thank the League of Women Voters and all the people here tonight. There's a lot of people in this room right now, and you guys do so much good for this community and have so for so many years. I want to thank you for the energy you do to put in to make our city great. I love the civic engagement I'm seeing this evening, so thank you. I want to thank my fellow candidates for running. We could not ask for a better pool of people to choose between. This election, we will pair three new candidates, three new council members, with 2 council members still in their first year. We'll have a fresh council. Mayor Martinez and Vice Mayor Donahue, they're still in their first term. I'm looking forward to working with Scott and Diane and build on the success the council has accomplished. When I moved to Emeryville over 12 years ago, this was an industrial town, and it has transformed into an urban oasis, and I really love this town. Right now we're dealing with housing challenges, traffic, rapid growth. My campaign is based on 3 ideas: sustainability, livability, and accountability. When I'm elected and up here on this dais, I will keep going on my track record of seeing those 3 things through. I expect housing and development to come up a lot this evening, and those central questions tonight are central to livability in Emeryville. I will work with the council to increase Emeryville's stock of affordable homes. We're about to have a 20% increase in our population. If we're going to sustain the quality of life in Emeryville, we're going to need to increase our public services, our parks, and most importantly, our transportation infrastructure. We need to be bike friendly and increase public transit. We do this by holding developers and staff accountable. I look forward to tonight's discussion, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you, Christian. Allie?
Hi. My name's Allie Medina. I've lived in Emeryville for about 4 years now. I live in the Triangle neighborhood. I currently serve on the Parks and Recreation Committee. I work as a regional political organizer for SEIU-UHW. That's a healthcare workers union. In the past, I've served as executive director for the San Francisco Democratic Party. The 3 issues I mostly want to tackle if elected are bike and pedestrian transit options, increasing our parks and open space here locally, and of course affordability and housing options. Affordability and housing is something you're probably going to hear from everybody, and it's something the entire Bay Area is talking about. While we're not going to fix it as a single council in a region that's hard pressed to find solutions, we can do some simple things to assist residents locally. We can enhance tenant protections, and we can negotiate higher percentages of affordable housing in any new development to make sure that workers in Emeryville can afford to live in Emeryville and to keep families here. For parks and open space, we have extremely limited land in the city, and I believe we need to make sure that we don't do anything to reduce our already tight ratio of parks to residents, which is about half of what surrounding communities have. We need to make sure that all developments are focused on having street-level parks that are accessible for families and children here. Finally, for bike and pedestrian transit, San Pablo is a massive issue. We have dangerous crossings on the Powell Street connection to the Bay Trail. I have a background in statewide consultancy for the California Bicycle Coalition to advocate for transit funding and planning. We've got millions of dollars in Measure BV allocated for the city of Emeryville that we need to make sure is used in the best way possible to increase citizens' ability to walk and bike safely in the neighborhood and improve safety for the 2 schools on either side of San Pablo.
Thank you, Allie. John? About
Good
us?
evening. Good evening. Thank you, Diz and the League of Women Voters, for having this forum tonight. Thank you to all of you for coming out and listening to all the candidates. My name is John Bowders. I'm a 5-year resident of Emeryville. I live right down the street here in the Park Avenue district. I have spent the last 15 years as a nonprofit policy director and a legal aid attorney, working on several core issues that I think will benefit me if I serve you on the City Council in Emeryville. I've spent almost 10 years working on homelessness issues and affordable housing development, and I now work in public safety policy development at the state level, moving budgetary allocations to mental health and substance use treatment programs to help reduce recidivism in our community. I currently serve on the Emeryville Planning Commission. I'm a member of the Emeryville Housing Committee. I am the chair of the Emeryville School District's, Emory Unified School District's Parcel Tax Oversight Committee, where we work to make sure that art and music are part of the core curriculum for all students here in Emeryville. And I also am a member of the Park Committee, a resident committee that successfully negotiated a community benefits agreement with Lennar Corporation for the Sherwin-Williams project just a couple weeks ago. My core goals, if elected to the City Council, are 3. Number 1 is what I'm good at, housing. We have a lot of housing needs here in the community: affordability, stability, inclusivity. We need to have tenant protections in place. The Emeryville Housing Committee has put forth to the City Council a tenant protection and a just cause eviction ordinance, which, if elected, is something I will see implemented here in the community. I would also like us to continue our path on building more solid, affordable, family-friendly housing. Second, I would like to improve our overall transit infrastructure. Too often the dialogue is about bikes and peds or cars or intersections. We need to do comprehensive transit infrastructure overhaul and look towards the future of what our community's transit needs are going to be, so that we have a system that protects residents in neighborhood communities and also protects mass transit usership. Finally, I would like to expand park space and make civic venues that promote community engagement more available and accessible to the community. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, John. So let's begin with questions that try to address these many things. You've talked, the 5 of you have spoken about some common themes: sustainability, livability, affordable housing, transportation, especially getting away from cars. Let's talk about that last one first. As you know, with climate change, we need to reduce our carbon footprint, and we need to have fewer cars for traffic, as well as just because we need to move on to renewable energy. So how would you, we've talked about bikes, we've talked about more transit. You have Emeryville around, which the rest of the community is quite excited about. We wish we had that. But what would you actually do to better bring in more bikes, to better focus transit so people can use it, to connect to BART and so forth, and how would you pay for it? We'll begin with you, John.
I think one issue that comes up is that a lot of density concerns around the Bay Area, people are interested in building up because we're running out of land. But here in Emeryville, we're never going to have a BART stop. We aren't. So the idea of the population continuing to grow and still being able to have easy transportation, I don't believe that's viable. The Emeryville is phenomenal. In terms of getting rid of cars and getting more bikes, I don't think that's going to happen. I know that there's a belief that if you have less parking spots, you'll have less cars. No, I think that means you'll have more congestion. You'll have more people's cars moving into your neighborhood because they're moving out of their apartment complex that doesn't have enough parking for them. I mean, I think if we're talking about the environment, we need to talk about installing solar, finding better ways to use our electricity, getting electric cars, and supporting that sort of item.
Thank you, John. Christian?
Thank you. As somebody who drives an electric car and has solar panels on his house, I've already been thinking about this a lot. I bike to work. it is something that I encourage others to do. But there are things that we can do that are simple and cost-effective. We need to increase the merry-go-round so it goes to West Oakland BART. We know we have a large percentage of our population who uses that BART station. Somebody at a recent meeting threw out the idea of traffic calming on Horton by closing it at 40th. I'd love to look into that. There are things like that that you can do that encourage bicycling. But the important thing you said is, how do we pay for these things? Emeryville doesn't have a lot of metered parking. We let people park for free here. That is one way where we can discourage driving and use those funds to increase our public transit. We can use it to increase other accesses and encourage people to bike and do other things. And then on a personal note, I'd love to see more electric car chargers in town so people are encouraged to switch over. Thank you.
Allie?
I'm going to focus my answer specifically on a major project that we do have money in the pot for, and that's San Pablo revitalization. There's $4 million allocated for it out of Measure BB funding, and that's going to be a comprehensive street overhaul. Now, because of one of our city council members we're losing is on the seat of the ACTC, I'd like to, if elected, take over that seat and advocate strongly for a comprehensive plan that would improve bike and pedestrian safety, but also advocate for rapid transit along San Pablo. You cannot, of course, reduce traffic by taking parking spots away. You can reduce traffic by providing people with alternatives that don't require them to drive their cars everywhere.
Thank you, Allie. John?
Great, thank you. Three quick answers to this question. First, one way to access West Oakland BART specifically is something that I just had the privilege of working with the other members of the Park Avenue Residents Committee on 2 weeks ago. In our negotiated agreement for community benefits with Lennar, we received as a concession a $1 million investment in a private shuttle that will be free to all Emeryville residents beginning halfway through the development of this project that will go directly to West Oakland BART, no stops in between. It will be an amazing opportunity for residents to connect directly to West Oakland BART, and we leverage the development process to actually pay for it. It will not cost Emeryville a dime. I'm very proud of that, and that's something we need to do more often. On top of that, I agree that we need to actually make mass transit more accessible. When mass transit and traffic routes are made more accessible generally, we can then improve bike transit routes, which makes bikes more appealing and more used by people going to BART. And finally, affordable housing sounds like it doesn't belong here, but the truth is that affordable housing, when put near mass transit and other types of infrastructure, low-income households will use alternatives more likely than other people will.
Thank you, John. Louise?
Sure. Paying for transit, I'm going to focus on that because that's how we keep transit going. First of all, the private sector has jumped in and providing alternative ways. There's a new business-to-business ferry service that's currently operating out of our Emeryville Marina and providing commute service for specific businesses and their employees over to the San Francisco side of the shoreline. Also, they connect to Berkeley, and they have plans to go to Martinez. And in the future, they do have plans to go to the public. But the other aspect that I'd like to for people to consider is the core of the issue. A recent report, economic report, indicated that here in the East Bay, our population are basically commuters. So if we don't want people commuting, then one core way is to attract and retain more businesses here in Emeryville.
Thank you, Louise. Following up on that, actually, you've all mentioned the need to have more affordable housing, and that's a real bugaboo, as you know. People living in Emeryville and working in Emeryville will be the very best thing for traffic. So, and affordable housing in an area of strong corporate and business development is an additional challenge. So starting with you, Christian, how would you actually go about getting affordable housing? And you might start by defining what affordable housing is.
So I think affordable housing is when you're spending less than 30% of your income on your rent or your mortgage. So when we talk about it, it's a percentage of the median income, or the median income for the area. But you know, before I came this evening, the headline that caught my eye was the Bay Area has reached peak unaffordability. I just loved that phrase. We've reached peak unaffordability. We didn't even know that was possible. but here we are. You help people out in town by demanding that as we add new developments, like they did with the park development, and thank you guys for that, that we increase our percentage of affordable homes. We're at 11% now. I want to say it's 17 or 19% that we're getting out of the Sherwin-Williams development, and we need to keep moving that needle up until we're either in line or ahead of our neighbors. We need to look at alternatives. The city owns a couple of small parcels in town. We could look at funding sources and developing some of our own. This is an issue across the Bay Area.
Allie?
Of course. So yeah, I agree. I think a really great answer is that we can negotiate higher percentages of affordable housing, and that's something that we've seen work in San Francisco. They countered an offer for 20% with 40%, and they got it built because they wanted a new stadium. We have incredibly valuable land here, and continuing to do this work of negotiating with developers to maximize community benefit is important. The flip side of affordability is that you can try to press the cost down all you want, but you also have to raise base wages. I think Emeryville is in the right direction on that, making it so that people who work here can afford to live here, which has all sorts of community benefits. And on top of that, we can look at investing more in our first-time home buyers loan program to allow people to permanently live here.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot I can't say in 60 seconds on this issue, but to make the point, I would like to just reiterate a couple things Christian Pat said related to affordable housing. The California Budget and Policy Center, which is an independent organization that evaluates statistics, including housing, estimates that the state of California is about 1 million units short of the need currently for affordable housing. And every community has a role to play in that, and a small community like Emeryville still can make a difference. As was mentioned, there are several parcels of city-owned land. The city still owns properties that it purchased during redevelopment. Those should be priority development opportunities. I would like us to actually turn those over to community land trusts, which are nonprofits, who can then do ground leases out to developers with the condition that it be affordable and ownership. On top of that, I think that we have to also just think about how do we preserve and protect affordable housing. It's not great to build it on one end and lose it on the other, and the city is taking some good steps under the leadership of council and other city bodies to make sure that we protect affordable housing.
Thank you, John. Louise?
Sure. In the arena of affordable housing, I think that I'd like the city to continue to work with our other neighbors, the adjoining cities. This is a regional issue. We can't deal with it ourselves, but through measures such as the ballot measure that's on for us to vote on November 8th, we have the opportunity to continue to fund various programs for those within the lower income brackets. However, to me, affordable housing also means for those of us in the middle. Those of us in the middle are continually kind of scrunched, and so I'd like to see more programs for the first-time home buyers, or some perhaps looking at the thresholds that are used to determine whether someone is would qualify. In other states, they don't have such a strict lower threshold. And so I would like programs to aim at those of us who are in the middle. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. John?
In the Bay Area, there's over 7 million people. I think the idea that Emeryville should be the 1.2 square miles that tackles the affordable housing issue is a bit overreaching. I think that affordable housing should be directed to areas that already have the transportation infrastructure in place. I'm talking about BART stops that can get people to and from their jobs, because once we start trying to concentrate all the development here in Emeryville, that means we need to redo our entire infrastructure to support hundreds of new people, if not thousands, depending on what metric we're using for these affordable housing. So I like the idea of more home ownership. I love the idea of the first-time home buyers, helping them move to Emeryville. But yes, we should definitely work with every single new development that comes in to making sure that we can maximize below market rates, but we should only do what we can and leave regional issues to where it can actually be supported.
Thank you, John. You also mentioned sustainability and the neighborhoods. As you grow your density and build more buildings upward that have affordable units in them, how do you retain the neighborhoods, the mom and pop stores that were referred to, the livability of the city? Allie, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think some policies that are particularly effective are looking at banning formula retail in certain neighborhoods. We certainly have a lot of formula retail. What did you tell me? We had 6 Subways here? That's plenty, I think. I think we need to support small businesses by making sure that we have city streets that allow people to walk in. When you have adequate bike and pedestrian infrastructure, you see a 30% increase in walk-in business. And that has been shown in New York City, in Long Beach, and in Fort Worth. City Labs does amazing studies on it. So I think those kind of policies to improve the walkability, livability, and small business well-being in the city are very important.
Thank you, Allie. John?
So one opportunity we have to improve the sustainability or livability of our community as we build up, which you noted I think appropriately, is the development of park space. It is a natural human need to have access to the outdoors. I know we can sometimes forget that living in an urban area, but there is personal harmony, collegiality, civic engagement comes from having civic spaces where we can connect with one another. And as we build up, we have to also preserve that space and preserve that environment for us to have access to that which makes us whole, makes us healthy, improves civic discourse and dialogue. And those are the things that help generate and share ideas, that help build that sustainability and livability. People become more connected to their community, they become more invested in the future of it, and they become more neighborly to one another too.
Thank you, John. Louise?
Yeah, I think that the remarks by the other candidates are right on. I would like to also offer that, again, our whole community, our society is evolving and changing. And an area within Emeryville regarding entertainment and kind of livability and what can we do in town is to support things like the Allegro Ballroom or the skate park, or to try to attract some additional kind of amusement category of activities here. I know in Orinda there's a popular dance place that does salsa and that sort of thing. So I'd like to also recognize how we are changing and that there's perhaps also a need to focus on inside activities for a range of people, whether it be our seniors down to our young people and particularly the preschool kids.
Thank you. John?
In terms of livability and community, with the loss of the Chamber of Commerce, I don't feel that the small businesses, the local businesses, have the same voice that they once did. And I think that by supporting them and connecting them with neighborhood community groups, we would have a better chance of getting more civil involvement by getting the groups together with the companies, getting them to sponsor events, whether it's movie nights and then a food truck with a local restaurant showing up, something that creates a sense of happening. You know, on Friday night, let's go to the park where these 2 restaurants are going to be, where the new Pirate Press record's going to be playing records. I think it's about finding the people that are here and helping them help the rest of us.
Thank you, John. Christian?
This is one of those times when going last isn't an advantage. I love some of the ideas thrown out there. I'm going to say, as Subway is my son's favorite place to eat, I'm okay with there being 7 in town. They are small family franchise businesses. I do want to hearken back to home ownership, though. You know, we're a renter's town, and that does give us some challenges. So I'm going to take a moment and praise what we do well in town. We have an active community service department. We do those food trucks and movies. I go to them with my family and I love them. You know, I run into people all the time. You know, the Easter egg hunt that we do. We need to build on those, and that's how we'll be sustainable as a town. We'll get people who want to have their kids here. And that's another core issue to me, is we need to work on our schools. Right? As people age and transition out of their rental homes and want a home of their own, they want a school. They move out of Emeryville because they need quality schools to send their kids to. So those are some things that I would work on, is building on the community services we have and helping work with the schools to get them better. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Moving to a very different topic, or although it's not that different, you have a climate action plan for the city of Emeryville. We're going to begin with you, John.
Yeah.
What are the 3 highest priorities in that plan, and how are they coming? Are you making progress?
3 highest priorities, and are we making progress?
In the climate action plan.
The climate
or
action
toward
plan.
climate action.
Well, I think that the first thing, I mean, the Climate Action Plan is a really wonderful thing. Even though we're a smaller city, I think it's a great thing that we undertook. The first thing I would point to is the protection of our shoreline. I'm very proud to participate in shoreline cleanups, and we have to recognize that global warming is real, and that as a coastal community, we are under the constant threat of water erosion and long-term flooding for our community. And so protecting our coastline and making conscientious changes to how we operate as a community is important to that, and I think that playing our role, we've done that well. Second, I think, is how do we mitigate traffic and air pollution? Noise pollution also comes from traffic. I think we could do a lot better in this department. I don't think we've actually come as far as we need to. And so I would like to see us do more to mitigate traffic and reduce drivers on the road. And then I think the third thing after that is noise is a separate issue. It's not part of the Climate Action Plan in particular. But when you think about our total greenhouse gas reduction goals, we have a lot to do still, and it's a goal of ours, but we haven't done a very good job.
Thanks, John. Louise?
Yeah, the Climate Action Plan is a good broad stroke to approach that issue. However, you need to get down to the specifics and details and who's going to do what. For over a year and a half, I was a citizen representative on the Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. Big mouthful. But essentially what it was looking at was an issue that John raised, shoreline flooding. What are we going to do? Do we need dikes, levees, that sort of thing? If we have another earthquake, what are things that we can encourage our community members to do? What can we do regarding building? So again, and in this plan, it really identified who in the city, staff-wise, would be responsible, and how could we reach out to the community. So again, it's good to have the broad plans, but we need to spend time also on those nitty-gritty details.
Thank you. John?
I agree about the nitty-gritty details. The idea of the waters raising because of global warming, that's not something we need to come to terms with. It's a fact. I don't think anyone, or at least hope no one here, denies that that's going to happen. But it doesn't help us if Emeryville plans for it and Berkeley and Oakland don't, because the water will just come back around. So I think what this city can do specifically to do our part, that harkens back to, again, solar, electric cars, enhancing the public transportation to incentivize people to use that. I think Emeryville's actually doing a very good job so far, and we just need to continue on the current path.
Thanks, John. Christian?
So in prepping for this evening, one of the questions, or when I asked Mayor Martinez, I said, what should I really prep for? The one thing she said to me was our Climate Action Plan, and she handed it to me, and I had already had a copy, but I thought that was very telling that this was going to come up. I'll agree with what a lot of people have said. Climate change is real. The waters are rising. But I do believe very much in the axiom, you need to act locally. And so while I agree that we shouldn't wait for Berkeley and Oakland to do something, we need to take action now. The shoreline cleanup, traffic is really, we know cars are the biggest polluters after farms. I'd love to see us put some things very practically in the ground. We have compostable material requirement, but not compost bins everywhere. So when people are visiting our dynamic retail or our restaurants and they get to-go containers and they're finished with their meal, there isn't compost readily available. It's a nice, simple, easy fix. So going back to the Climate Action Plan, I do think there's some really great broad strokes, but we need to do the simple things as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Allie?
Again, with the going last and so many good ideas on the table. But a couple things I think are really important are, once again, to reiterate one of my key points here, that transit alternatives are a really important way to reduce our carbon emissions. And also to fully fund emergency safety services. I know that a lot of people are at the firefighters thing. I unfortunately couldn't because I had work this morning. But they have asked to have full staffing in Emeryville, and we have 20,000 people here during the daytime. If there were to be an emergency, over 20,000 maybe, but with 20,000 jobs here alone in the daytime. And if there were to be an emergency, we need to make sure that we adequately staff all of our emergency services and make sure we are prepared for worst case scenarios.
Thank you. Okay, the last prepared question. We've talked about affordable housing and we've talked about livability, but we also have a homeless population that often get left out. What would each of you do to alleviate the problem of the homeless? in Emeryville and the many associated issues associated with that. So we'll go back to you, Louise.
Yes, homeless, the 10 cities. Who would want to live there? Well, I've lived in the Bay Area a number of years, as many of you have. We've seen the same people around. They have chosen a lifestyle like that. And so to be candid, recently I just said to myself, okay, you know, they are here, this is their choice. How can we have them a part of our community? What can we do, as the question was raised? Began to look around, and I saw that there are some issues with the way it's done now, where they basically just occupy. The sanitation is not there for them. They don't have trash pickup. There are other aspects of it. However, there are, in other cities, things are being done that are very productive. For example, in Portland, Oregon, a tent city basically became in a contractual arrangement with the city. They have sanitation, they have trash pickup, they have their own little mini homes to live in, and they like it.
Thank you, Louise. John?
I'm going to have to go ahead and completely disagree with that. I don't think it's a choice. I think it's about mental health. It's about issues with drugs. It's about issues with having to run away from a bad situation. That said, I like that you said, how are we going to alleviate? Because it's not something we can solve. This will always be an issue. So I think that the important thing to do is to ensure that we fund things like the Emeryville Citizens Assistance Program to make sure that there is outreach out there for those that are able to get back on their feet, that there's job training, for those that need mental assistance or some sort of medical help, that there are avenues out there for them to receive it. I know some will say that you just need houses to house the homeless, but again, to get them to that point where they're ready to move back in and to be able to fund a lifestyle like that takes assistance.
Thank you, John. Christian?
So I think I'll just keep building on what was said before. I always reject the idea that we have a homeless problem. We have a social services problem. We have a lack of taking care of those among us who are struggling. It is not that we have homeless, it's that we don't have services in place to provide them homes, to provide them bridges, to provide them the services they need so they don't have to live in a tent city. You know, I think a housing first approach is the way that it's working in Salt Lake City. You get people into a single address, and then you bring services to them. I agree with what Ms. Engel said earlier. We know who they are. When the social services agencies come together, when the police officers come together, they know each and every homeless person by name. They're the frequent flyers in our hospitals. They're the frequent flyers in our jails. If we take a people-first approach, we can help reduce it and get people into services and homes and help them deal with the issues that they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Allie?
Right. Again, homelessness is a regional and nationwide issue, so we need to seek regional approaches to this. And so often, our police are first responders when called upon the scene and the first people to interact with homeless people in the street. And often it's a mental health situation. So we need to fully fund training for our police to deal with mental health situations. We also need to address the crisis that is Medi-Cal. A lot of homelessness is actually created by healthcare emergency situations. We have a clinic coming to Emeryville. We need to make sure that healthcare facilities here accept Medi-Cal so that we don't exacerbate or ignore the healthcare needs of anybody here.
Thank you, Allie. John?
So I have a unique perspective, perhaps. I have directly assisted over 3,000 people in my career who are homeless, working on street outreach, taking people through all kinds of social service problems and processes to find solutions. And what we have to remember is that they are no different than the rest of us. They are people, and their problems are as unique to them as ours are to us. Housing is the only solution to homelessness. That should seem very common sense. And the truth is, as a couple people have mentioned, service-enriched housing is the only way to actually ensure that a person stabilizes in housing and remains safe in housing. Many complex and different reasons lead to homelessness, but what we can do is several things. Co-locating services that people need and rely on in the homeless community is something that we have to prioritize. We cannot expect people who have no assets, transportation, communication, ID to navigate all the complex social systems we have. We have to put those in one place for them, and then we have to concentrate on solving their problem with housing.
Thank you, John. Okay, we have a whole bunch of questions from the audience, and I will try to combine a couple of them. One of them it relates to the San Pablo corridor, which Measure BB will help address, and there are plans, and plans around that. But the question is, why is the San Pablo corridor so different in Emeryville than in Berkeley? And what are the plans in the future for the San Pablo corridor? So we'll begin with you, John.
I'm not aware of what the programs are, so I can't speak to if there is anything in place specific as to what they plan on doing with it. I can say what I would like to see, and that would be mixed-use space, combining both small business with art galleries, things that bring the community in, and housing. There are a lot of vacant spots, and I love seeing that, when Novel Brewing opened up, it kind of created a little revitalization. When they closed that long stretch, I think it was about a mile a few months back, and then brought in a lot of community groups, we didn't see the turnout. And so I think we need to, again, help small business to recreate San Pablo, to create a place people want to go. Traffic's an issue, but that's separate. People are going to go commute on San Pablo. We want them to go there to stay and shop. And so I think community involvement and small business is the way to do that.
Thank you, John. Christian?
The challenge of the San Pablo corridor is that it is Oakland, it is Berkeley, it is Emeryville, all in a very small and a very short period of time. We just opened up what should be the jewel of the city, the ECCL right there, and the traffic lights weren't even in place and ready. We need to have a plan. We need to have bike lanes on San Pablo that connect us. San Pablo runs the length of Emeryville, runs the length of Berkeley, and so we should really focus in on developing it. I agree with you that some nice retail on there. I live right off of San Pablo, and I always wonder what's going to go in this space and what's going to go in that space. But the challenge is the land changes so quickly. The street itself is not the city's, but I want to say it's part of the county or state highway program, and so it makes that fight of who owns it. What I'd love to see is bike lanes and more retail up there, and really a focus in on developing and using those Measure BB transportation funds to extend the Emeryville down San Pablo.
Allie?
So San Pablo is owned by Caltrans, and we have about $4 million set aside from Measure BB for revitalization. This absolutely needs to be regional because it's connected to Berkeley, it's connected to surrounding cities, and it's a fantastic thoroughfare for residents to get to different cities in the Bay Area. So what we need to do is advocate for contiguous protected bikeways and enhanced pedestrian safety. The difference between San Pablo here and in North Berkeley is more small businesses, big trees, metered parkings, and better pedestrian crossings. And that is what we need to see more of here, in addition to bike safety and hopefully bus rapid transit, so it becomes a corridor that's helpful for working people to get to and from work every day.
Thank you, Allie. John?
Yeah, this goes back to I agree with what Allie was saying about this being a regional approach, and for the reasons Christian made, we're this little tooth in the middle of a series of teeth that cover San Pablo, and so development of that as a corridor is difficult. But going back to my opening statement, transit has to be at the center. Transit and housing are the center of all development ideas. The businesses and the people who come there are what you hope and plan for, but they're not what create it in good development. And so I think making smart development that's accessible, in particular to mass transit. San Pablo is a natural mass transit corridor for us. It takes people to Oakland and Berkeley and Emeryville, and to BART at cross corridors. We need to make that the priority. We're talking about building a new senior all affordable housing building near the ECCL right along that corridor. That connects people to medical, that connects people to family and regional transit. So I think that the priority thing should be making mass transit more effective and usable for people, and providing protected bike and pedestrian spaces there as well.
Thank you, John. Louise?
Regarding the differences between Emeryville and Berkeley, in Emeryville we have a history of and a legacy of strip commercial in our kind of segment, and so we've been slower kind of evolving. In Berkeley, they had similar, but they were it was a more compact area, and many years, well, a number of years ago, clusters of small businesses that were attractive to the local neighborhood people coming there, encouraging the foot traffic to them. That's what revitalized the segments that I'm thinking of in Berkeley that are kind of clustered around University Avenue. And they are specialty shops. So it not only attracts people from the neighborhoods, but citywide. So again, we come back to the circumstance of there's real value in small businesses. And in an economic report recently, it emphasized that the whole East Bay is very attractive for small business.
Thank you, Louise. This question from the audience is really about balancing development and parks. You've talked about the challenge of finding enough land for parks. And the question I will read directly. The general plan says we must build 26 acres of new park open space within 12 years. Since there's not enough available land for this, we'll probably need to use land that already has buildings on it. Why shouldn't we make the Sherwin-Williams site a big park? And we'll start with you, Christian.
I think that would have been a great idea. I'm laughing because I know who wrote the question.
We all do.
So I think I think that would have been a great idea for the city to have acquired that land and built a park. We've come up with another good idea. There's an agreement in place already with Lennar. I think going forward, we really need to be looking at where we can build more parks. You know, it's always going to be a trade-off. I think it is a big balancing act. Right now, I don't know, I think affordable housing is an important piece. I don't know that at the expense of parks, but I would vote for affordable housing over parks at the moment. And so when we look at the parcels that we have in town, I'd like to see some affordable housing first. But we could spend some money on parks, and we may need to consider a park bond to do that and look at where we could put in some more parks in Emeryville. So going forward, it's going to just be that balancing act, and it's going to be a challenge.
Allie.
Right. Yeah, I agree. That project has gone through extensive community and public review. It's been in the planning process for a very long time. So I think it's important to look to the future and what we can do to increase the ratio of parks for local residents and families. We can make sure that any future developments do not lower the ratio of parks to residents and in fact increase them. We can make sure all new developments that have parks have them at street level, which is much more accessible. I would also support a parks bond. We're going to have to accept that there's just not going to be massive, like we're not going to put a Golden Gate Park in the middle of Emeryville. We don't have space for it. So we're going to have to get creative with looking at improving parklets, linear parks, which I know are not always popular, but if done well can really enhance communities and provide small play spaces for children.
Thank you, Ellie. John?
Thank you for the question, Brian. So, you know, the idea of having it be a large park, as I have, I think, previously said to those who've asked me, I think it's a great idea. At the time where you could do that. And the truth is that you have to look at balancing what is feasible with what is the ideal. And that doesn't mean you give up on your ideal, but what it means is you fight for all the other ideals that you have as leverage in the process. And so the Park Avenue Residents Committee secured a 2-acre park on a piece of brownfield. We secured a free shuttle to West Oakland BART. We secured bike spaces for every resident in that building, a new bike infrastructure. We secured 10 shared parking spaces for that neighbor, a public art gallery free to the community, and many other community benefits that the city would not be able to finance or plan for had we not used that space as a tool to bring those additional assets to the community. We absolutely have to build more park space. There are ways to do that. I do support looking into a park bond, and I'm very interested in ways that we can fulfill the general plan, but yes, we have to balance.
Louise?
Yeah, I think the park group, John, you've done an excellent job. All the people, if there are any here present, you've done an excellent job. I would focus on another aspect of our parks, and we have a shoreline. We have a tremendous shoreline. What do we do, though? We do the shoreline cleanup. and we have a kind of 4th of July activity, which is very nice. But we really don't promote our shoreline as kind of an entertainment place. Berkeley has the Kite Fair, which brings lots of people. So I would offer this other aspect too, that we need to bring more of the business, small businesses who might be able to in some way create different business opportunities down there that would attract people to come to the shoreline. There are the charter boats there that are attractive to a lot of people, but there are many other things that I think are percolating out there in someone's business mind, and so let's bring that audience into this discussion.
Thank you, Louise. John?
When it comes to balance, I think if the city owns a half parcel in one area and we decide to build a park in just that one place, does that help the entire city or does it help the people right there? Obviously it helps those that can walk there, those with pets, those with families in that immediate area, but there's no way for us to create a general overarching park space that is required or called for in the general plan. So what we need to do is with every single development coming up, we need to look at it specifically and how we can use that specific space to, you know, create the best livable space for families for walking. But what we can do is try to incentivize the use of the space we have, and that's supporting the Parks and Rec a little bit more, that's supporting community events out there. But yeah, it'd be nice if we could just attach our city to Oakland Hills and claim it all for our own, but it'll be tough.
Thank you. The last question will have to go a little bit faster, but we've talked about small businesses. Emeryville's minimum wage is high, and there is an impact on small business, or there is perceived to be an impact. How do you think this is impacting small business in our city? And if a one-year study indicates it is harming and discouraging them, then will you address this? And we'll begin with Allie.
Of course. Yeah. We haven't seen a one-year review on the effect of the minimum wage in Emeryville. What we have seen in other cities and across the country when they've historically raised the minimum wage is that more money in workers' pockets immediately gets spent and returned to the community. Has not triggered a great recession in any time that we've raised it nationally or on a state level. So I certainly hope that it's not suddenly doing that here, and I look forward to reading that report with interest. I also think that it's important to support our small businesses by offering them incentives like increased foot traffic, by better planning, as well as looking to what can keep them in Emeryville by offering tax breaks and that sort of support that they might need. I think you cannot just, increase costs without looking to how else can we support our small businesses.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I think that to the first question of should we review it, absolutely. The role of government, the business of government, especially at the local level, is to continuously review the priorities and policies of a community to ensure that they continue to serve the best interests of the people who live in it. So absolutely, we must continue to review things. That being said, one-year study is not a fatal chapter in anything, and it's really about looking at the details of that and understanding. I've had conversations with many small business owners here in the community. Some of them are fine in complying with the minimum wage ordinance. Some of them have left town. So we have a mix of results and a mix of details as to why that's happening. I think the important thing to do is what we could have done better the first time around, which is engage in a more discreet, focused, and inclusive dialogue with all the stakeholders to have a more vetted process so that people would feel greater integrity with the outcome.
Thank you, John. Louise?
Yeah, I think the statements made by our other candidates are on spot. Minimum wage is it's kind of a difficult issue because in speaking with other business owners, small business owners, they really would like to be able to have workers who have adequate wages. There are the realities, though, of on small businesses, typically it's a very small profit margin. And so it's a dilemma. So I would urge that as we move forward, that we do so on a more of a region-wide basis. because then any ripple effects of what happens here, it'll be happening everywhere, so there's then not necessarily the incentive to move because it's happening everywhere.
Thank you. John?
I understand that increasing minimum wages on state levels and federal levels has not had a negative impact, but we're talking about a 1.2 square mile minimum wage increase. I think that by trying to be a model city and leading by example could possibly mean that we're leading from behind. I believe that freezing wages at their current level until Berkeley and Oakland or one of them catch up would help incentivize companies into staying instead of looking to move elsewhere to decrease their costs. So yeah, I think a one-year study is important. We need to see what the impacts are, and even if the impacts are slight, if people perceive there to be negative impacts, then that means that there are negative impacts, because perception becomes reality when enough people talk about it.
Christian?
I think the challenges of running a small business are manyfold. I've seen it firsthand in my family. I've seen people struggle with that, but I don't think that should trump people struggling to live on a fair wage. People who make minimum wage struggle to pay their rent, struggle to buy food. And so unless we're going to have a massive cost of living decrease, I don't know how we can tell people, no, you need to work just as hard for less money. I'm sorry, I'm a supporter of Emeryville's minimum wage. I think we need a living wage for people. I'm not going to coach it in any language other than that. I'm going to be very direct. If it impacts your small business, you need to adjust your business plan. If it impacts what you're doing, you need to do that. Okay? Paying people a wage that they can afford to rent a home on, paying people a wage they can afford to get their children into childcare, keeps people from being homeless, keeps people from having to rely on government services, and it is just the way it should be. I don't care if our neighbors do it. I want it in my town.
Thank you. Thank you all, candidates, and thank you, audience, for your questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to all of them. My goodness, there's a lot. I'd like to hear from each of you now a 2-minute statement of why we should vote for you, and we'll start with you, John.
Thanks. Thank you again to everybody who sat through this candidate forum. I really appreciate you taking the time to become informed citizens of the future of our city. I have spent a lot of time working with many of you in this room, in fact, and other neighbors in this community to improve livability, sustainability, affordability, and civic engagement in our community. As I mentioned at the outset, I serve on a number of committees, and it's one thing to serve on a committee, and it's another thing to roll up your sleeves and actually get down into the nitty-gritty of the details. I think my experience here working in the city and the things that I've done are a demonstration of how I would lead as a city council person. I've successfully worked with some amazing people from the Park Avenue Residents Committee who I was very humbled to sit beside as we negotiated Emeryville's first ever community benefits agreement with a developer. I take meetings with every person who comes before the Planning Commission and go over those details for the future development of our city to ensure that we don't leave any opportunities behind. I work with members of the school district and committee members to make sure that the children who go to school here, whether they live in Emeryville or not, are afforded every educational opportunity possible to achieve and be members of our society as adults. I'm pleased to be endorsed by a number of people, and I think that the endorsements that I have speak to the breadth of coalitions that I'm able to build and bring to this community. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Alameda County Democratic Party, a number of state leaders including Senators Leno and Hancock, County Supervisor Keith Carson. I'm proud to be endorsed by all 5 members of our city council. But most importantly, I'm very pleased to be endorsed by close to 100 Emeryville residents who I've had the pleasure of working with side by side over the last few years on these items, and for those reasons I would kindly ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Louise.
Oh, we're jumping around.
We're going in order.
Oh, okay. All right. I bring a depth and a breadth of experience to this position. I've worked in entities that have a regional impact on the economy, both here and up in Oregon. So and from a strategic planning perspective. I've also worked on environmental issues that pertain to mixed-use development, housing, seaport, airport, industrial, and commercial. So again, breadth and depth. I've also tried to go out on my own as a small business, and I'm still there, yay. But there were several years when, during that slump time that we all felt, I was working at Barnes & Noble as a bookseller part-time. Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, I was there and I was working. So I'm very well acquainted with what it means regarding schedules, minimum wages, and such. Also, I was at Port of Oakland. I was a member of a union, and I was elected secretary. And I was also elected to be on the negotiating team with management, whom on some tables I was recommending and helping them make decisions, and then at the other, here I am negotiating for the union. But I've also, in my work recently, had occasion to hire farm workers, and have dealt with individual, farm workers, and eventually worked over to working with a small business person who had a crew. So again, I believe from the breadth of my experience and the depth of my experience on both sides of many of these critical issues, that I can offer that to you as we move forward in the upcoming years.
Thank you, Louise. John.
At the very beginning of our opening statements, I mentioned that the last item that I really want to touch on is the compass of the City Council and which direction it wants to go in. Right now, it wants to take all the regional issues and handle them right here and make it an Emeryville's problem instead of a county or a state's problem. So if you want Emeryville to continue being called a guinea pig by national media, then vote for the 3 candidates that are supported by the entire council, because they will continue to do the same regional approach, but only here. If you vote for me, that's a vote for having a city council that's going to attack issues that affect Emeryville residents and Emeryville businesses. I'm going to put our people, our businesses, and our development first before I start trying to tackle the entire Bay Area's problems. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Christian?
In a democracy, some assembly is required. So I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting, and I want to thank the audience watching at home. I appreciate you guys being active voters. I want to thank my fellow candidates. It's not easy to come up here and answer questions, so thank you. I also want to, I would not be here on this dais if it weren't for the support of Jack Asher, Diane Martinez, Scott Donahue, who've all endorsed me. And they've endorsed me knowing that I'm an elected official and I have a track record, and I'm running on that. I want to thank the Alameda Labor Council, the Democratic Party, the Green Party, and Local 55 firefighters, who also have endorsed me. I am committed to sustainable growth for our community, be it through encouraging green commuting, working for housing for all income levels and family sizes, and ensuring public spaces. My family has called Emeryville home since 2003. My track record of accountability, sustainability, and livability and transparency are there for the public to see. I disagree with my fellow candidate. We are residents of Emeryville, and I do support the residents of Emeryville, and I actively listen to them and encourage them to come talk with me anytime they have a concern. But we get the message wrong when we talk about business people in Emeryville getting precedence over people who work in Emeryville. We're a town that balloons up to 20, 30,000 people in the daytime because of people who work here. We are a town that should encourage people who work here to be able to live here. And we do that by not waiting for the rest of the nation to catch up with us. But we do that by holding our principles true and making sure Emeryville is truly a livable town, and a town that people feel good about coming and doing retail in. I like to shop locally and support businesses because I know they're paying a fair wage, because I know we're going to take care of the people who are amongst us. So thank you, and please come out and vote.
John Bautis, is there a rebuttal appropriate at this point?
I just wondered if Mr. Van Geffen's remarks could be responded to by those he called out on his closing statement, that's all.
They can be.
Okay.
And they are?
My only comment is
The three of us, I
the
think.
three of us who have been supported by members of the sitting city council in advocating to work for residents. I'm very pleased to be engaged with residents on a nightly basis here in the community, listening to them and talking to them about what their needs are. And I just want to reiterate that any person who's running for this office here in Emeryville should be oriented towards the residents' needs. And I just want to make it clear that that's the goal of all of us, I think.
Thank you. Thank you all, and I'd like to remind the audience and...
Ally hasn't
Oh,
had her
I'm sorry,
closing
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Okay, well, yes,
I'll be
please.
quick, I swear. I know you guys
Please,
wanna go
Ally. I am sorry, I am sorry.
Long night.
Thank you all so much. I'm blessed to go. So you've been sitting for the longest at this point, and I really appreciate everyone coming out and getting involved in this upcoming election. I know there's going to be a ridiculous amount of things on this ballot, and we're going to be at the very bottom. So thank you for your attention to us and this very important local race. I am running to improve my community. I'm hoping, if elected, that my experience will allow me to improve the lives of those around me. I've worked on advocacy campaigns for 10 years. I've registered tens of thousands of voters. I've managed budgets of up to $1 million a year and coordinated 20 employees across the state. I have extensive program management experience as well as direct outreach to citizens. And I think that in this town where we have 70% of our citizens are renters and we have extremely high household turnover rates, my background in community engagement is going to be really important for making sure that people are heard and their input is put into the community so that we can have a transparent and responsive city council. I'm running because I want to improve the lives of those around me on the issues of bike and pedestrian safety, which I do have a lot of experience in advocating on a statewide level for, in addition to increasing the affordability for those here and improving parks and open space in Emeryville. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ally. Thank you all. And I'd like to remind you that candidate Brenda Collins is not present tonight, so don't forget that she is also a candidate. If you'd like to meet with her, October 1st, 11 a.m. to 1 at Propaganda Restaurant, as Brittany mentioned. So thank you for coming. Thank you, audience, very much for being so attentive. And I'd like to thank the City of Emeryville for letting us use this beautiful City Council chamber. It's very nice. And please remember that you can always get more information from League of Women Voters on all of the measures, pros and cons. Google or search League of Women Voters California for the California measures and League in Emeryville for in your case, you have no measures on the ballot this time, but you will have 3 regional measures. Measure A1, which is the bond measure for housing, C1, which is AC Transit, and RR, which is BART bond. So go to the web, and you can also go to Voters Edge, which is co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters, to learn more about each of the measures and who funds them. And don't forget to vote November 8th. Thank you very much.